It's the SWP Disciple checking in. So it's 10:29. Just got out of the gym. Obviously, the news of the day: Charlie Kirk has been, can we say, assassinated? I'm not sure. I mean, it seems like it was a pointed attack, right? So I think that's what an assassination is like, where, regardless of whether the person's important or not, you know, where you go out, target I guess it would have to be a important person, right? To some degree. I have to look up the official definition, but from what I understand, it was like a single assassin's bullet, if you will, from like 200 yards away, which is pretty far. So that already tells us something about the shooter or assailant, however you want to look at it. You know, someone obviously who trains, someone who's probably a weapons fanatic, right? I don't know if any of you have ever gone shooting, right? So I just got my LTC, my license to carry, last summer, and I remember when we were like, you know, shooting targets and stuff, and I think I have a decently steady hand, not as steady as it used to be when I was younger. Obviously, I'm 46 now as of last week. Jeez. But, you know, I hit the target here and there, but in general, I found it decently difficult, even when I felt like I had whatever, you know, the target or whatever, because it wasn't just regular targets. Like, they did different things to kind of test your, I guess, ability in the field, if you will. And I'd say I maybe hit like 30% of the time or so. So I'm definitely not I forget what the word is. Is it a crapshoot, or, you know, someone who's like a really good target, you know, really good shooter. Let's just say I'm not a sniper by any means, right? I'm not even a gun guy. I only got my LTC because of my crazy roommate situation from last summer. I still haven't bought a gun, even though I have a pretty nice discount waiting for me at the local gun shop, of which we have a couple near me. But so that already tells us something. Probably a white guy. So really, the only thing that we kind of need to know to complete the story, you know, for political purposes, is, you know, was the person trans, right? You know, Charlie Kirk spewed a lot of anti-trans rhetoric. You know, I have my misgivings about some of the LGBTQ stuff, but, you know, in general, I want everybody to have their rights and live peacefully and all that and blah blah blah. There is some mission creep, but that's not what this video is about. Again, you know, I'm on the left, but I do have some conservative beliefs, but where I depart from anything conservative is that I'm not, you know, authoritarian. I want people to have as much, you know, rights and autonomy as, you know, possible, as long as it's not really negatively impacting other people. You know, read into that how you will. So, you know, we probably know some of the basics. Male, as this type of thing almost always is. Probably white. Was he liberal or conservative? That's the big thing. Now, a lot of liberals, a good chunk, I wouldn't say a majority, most of, especially of the you know, senators, Congress people, like, you know, dignitaries, they're all denouncing it, which is already different from a lot of, like, how a lot of Republicans would react to. We've already forgotten about the Minnesota husband and wife. I think they were congressmen or something. You know, I'm just saying this off the cuff, but it was like a couple months ago, and I think one was killed, both were shot, one died, and, you know, you get so numb to it. Like, of course I, you know, paid attention to, like, social media and the news of the day, but it wasn't like this, like the right clutching their pearls and, like, how could this be or whatever. I do remember some saying, like, you know, you get what you get, that type of thing. But it's different, right? Because not everything that appears to be equal on the surface is really equal, because I don't hear people on the left, you know, talking about, as I'm behind this Land Cruiser that has FJB with the American flag script, how apropos. But that's, you know, illustrative of kind of like what the rhetoric that you get from the right. I don't see any, like, I guess I'm trying to think of the acronym, FDT. You know, I don't see that on any cars. I don't see people with, like, you know, walking around with, like, Harris Waltz or Biden Harris t-shirts per se, or flags at their houses or anything like that next to the American flag or next to a Confederate flag. So, you know, we can try to be as obtuse about things as we want to be, but like, you know, the things are what they are at the end of the day. So obviously awful what happened to Charlie Kirk. You wouldn't want that, and I heard that the video was horrific. I haven't watched because like I don't want to see that, like blood spewing from someone's like carotid artery, and you know, essentially dying on the spot. I believe they said he died shortly after he got to the hospital, but a lot of times with those, they don't want to like alarm people and kind of give people some hope. And he likely was essentially dead, if not, you know, de facto or all the way dead before he even got there. But you know, they gotta kind of give you a story, and I'm fine with that. I totally understand that. But what's scary is now you're starting to see people online talking about like civil war, which they have for a while. Like I'm one of those people. I mean, you know me, like when I went to LA, me and my boy, my former friend, as it were, we went to have a lot of former friends lately. You know, went into like the super hood of LA. Like I like to see kind of like the worst of people, because a lot of times when people are spewing like, you know, platitudes and you know, hugs and kisses and all that sort of thing, it's not real. Like the more the subconscious stuff, or when you catch people with their hair down, that's the real, right? So and to my detriment, it's almost gotten the better of me being in the wrong place at the wrong time. But I already told you that story. So you're starting to, and you know where I was going with that is like online. I'll go to like the 4chans and the Stormfronts and places like that, and you know, parts of Reddit. Though Reddit I think is largely liberal, you know, I go to pages on IG, wherever, where there's people that let's just say don't think like me. And whenever you hear "don't think like me," that usually comes from somebody on the right, because it's to excuse whatever craziness that they're saying, and they're like, oh, it's just words and blah blah blah. Again, the news cycle is so fast and crazy, if you will. Remember at the top of the year, we had that plane crash. Was it a plane crash? It's all kind of blurring together. I mean, we also had like that barge that like knocked down the bridge in Baltimore, I think. But yeah, I think it was a plane crash. And immediately the Trump administration came out and said, like, you know, was preaching against DEI and basically saying the pilot must have been black or whatever. And of course, we found out that the pilot wasn't black and it had nothing to do with DEI. And Charlie Kirk famously came out and said, like, if my pilot is like, you know, a person of color or black, you know, I'm paraphrasing, you know, I have to wonder if he got the job due to DEI or whatever. And all kinds of craziness. And of course, now you let them tell it online. They're like, you know, he was a Christian man of faith, and you know, he just wanted better for America, and you know, he was a man of peace, and yada yada yada. And then if you just Google what did Charlie Kirk say that was so controversial or something to that effect, you'll see it all come up, including where he was like, I don't believe in the separation of church and state, and essentially saying that like the United States should be a theocracy, which is as un-American as anything that you can think of. Like literally anything. If you have just taken like 5th grade U.S. history or whatever, like I don't understand how that flies with any group, even especially the people who wear the 1776 like We the People shirts and all that or whatever. But the main point of this video, I don't want to make it long because I'm not really a political pundit. I'm not afraid of opining about politics. I know a bit. I have a year of law school under my belt. In addition to just being curious about this stuff, and I like to think I'm very fact-based. I don't really put much opinion in really anything I say, unless it's like warranted and just like utterly, you know, there's like a lot of circumstantial evidence or whatever that point towards something. But back to the scene of the crime. Or if you remember, last year on Memorial Day, this is where that shootout was, and I was hiding right behind where that guy was. Right, that's where that, I think, Honda Accord was. But I guess the party's got to go on, right? So anyway, I'll give you a quick story and then just kind of adjourn there, if you will. So 6th grade. So I just moved to New Britain, Connecticut with my family. Quickly had a friend who was like my best friend at the time. We'll call him O. I was in New Britain with my mom, my aunt, my cousins for like 2 years. We were dirt poor in those days. We had just moved from Boston. It was essentially what became like a transition. And, you know, before we moved to Springfield, not that we were doing better here, we, you know, moved to Springfield in 92. So we were in New Britain for fully 2 years, summer of 1990 to summer of 1992. So I was like 10 years old when I moved there. And became fast friends with my boy O, and his family like loved me. It was like, very strange, very reminiscent actually of my my most recent best friend who no longer talks to me or whatever. But the point of the story, just speeding it up. So if you remember back in 1990, for my fellow nerds, a very advanced system for its day, and actually very relevant to this day. There's a lot of homebrew coders who still make games for it. You could still pull it out at any party, anywhere, and people are like, oh snap, this is the jam. Of course, I'm talking about Neo Geo, right? So Sega Genesis came out in 89 in North America. It was like 88 in Japan. Super Nintendo came out in 91 in North America, 1990 in Japan as the Super Famicom. But Neo Geo, at this point, we were starting after the 8-bit era just ended. I mean, Nintendo and Master System kept going for a while. I think games were made for both systems up until like the mid-90s, but essentially they were done by about like 92. Some interesting games after that period too. But anyway, so the Neo Geo kind of blew the lid off of things, but it was a niche product, right? So it would be like if you were like a bag connoisseur and you knew you had a couple friends that could afford like an Hermes, right? Like a Birkin bag. But like, you know, in general, your group could afford some Louis, you know, some Chanel, whatever. Very nice bags. Maybe the plebeians of you had like an upper level Coach bag or whatever, right? But Neo Geo, this was like $700 for the gold system back in 1990, which I don't have like an inflation calculator in front of me, but that's got to be like approaching like $2,000 in today's money. So I don't need to tell you that most people could not afford a $2,000 in 2025 dollars. $2,000 system. Hell, most people can't afford a $700 system today. They just put it on a credit card. And you already know the discourse with that. Like, more and more people are in credit card debt. You know, back in those days, you always had people like, you know, filing bankruptcies and in credit card debt, but it was certainly more frowned upon back then, right? So, in other words, if you were to assume a system like that, most families were not buying a $700 in $1990 system for their kid, for their 10-year-old, no less, 10, 11-year-old. We were going into 6th grade, so I had just turned 11, maybe like a couple weeks into 6th grade. So anyway, I knew, you know, and it doesn't take any great mind or intelligence to understand that, like, yeah, you're probably not getting that system and you're just kind of BSing us or whatever. But, you know, he was the homie, whatever. I was always very supportive. I was like, oh, snap. And I would go over his house and he had a Sega Genesis, which was, you know, $200 system at the time. So that was like a big deal. And he got it like when it just came out, like it came out like in 89, and I think he had it like in the beginning of 1990 or whatever. And his mom really liked me. And you know how you have friends that are like kind of like they're not in the hood, but they're like hood adjacent, but they kind of have like a more middle class lifestyle. Like I remember their little duplex was like nice and clean and brand new carpet. And I think it was like new construction. And my paper route was like not too far from there, but it was like in the hood. So again, hood adjacent, kind of like where I live now, where like a mile down the road is Longmeadow and a mile in the other way is, by Springfield standards, the hood. You know, it's not Boston or New York hood, but, you know, not a nice neighborhood. So it was like that. And, you know, after school, I would go there and hang out or whatever. And we just became fast friends or whatever. So anyway, you know, time passes on. You know, I think it came out, I want to say it was like October of 1990. So obviously you allow some time. I actually had some friends who were in the projects that I delivered papers in who had Super Nintendo. I found that like incongruous even then with my 11-year-old mind, but it was like, cool, he's letting me come over and play some ActRaiser. I don't care. So anyway, you know, 6th grade passes, 7th grade passes, he doesn't get it, no big deal. He was pretty popular actually. It was like no skin off his teeth. Like, in other words, he got the clout off of saying he's thinking about getting a Neo Geo, and everyone treated it like he got the Neo Geo. So it's the same thing. I was watching Fox News at the gym. The manager of the gym, we'll call him E. He's actually a friend of mine. Oh, I ended up behind the Land Cruiser again. So you can stare at that FJB. And he always has like conservative news on, like, you know, the city, the town that I play in, Ludlow. He's from there, and it's a deep red town. Again, I hoop out there like on Fridays when the school year starts, and I've literally played ball with cats that had an FJB shirt on. And, you know, we're friendly on like a surface level. Obviously our ideologies don't match up or whatever. If we like really, really knew each other, we probably wouldn't like each other. But, you know, exchange pleasantries. Here's this assist. Oh, kick out. I'll splash this 3 or whatever. And, you know, we're cool. our games are simpatico on the court. Not that he was nice or anything, but like, you know what I'm saying? So anyway, he got the clout off of it as if he got it. So it was like no worse for wear. And it was like an important lesson I learned pretty early in life. I mean, this is 35 years ago. And I learned that certain people, if you're popular enough and if people like you enough, you can just utter the intention of doing something, or just kind of, as I like to call it, like huddle around the line of scrimmage, right? Like, those people who they aren't necessarily talented, aren't necessarily bright or anything, but they just kind of hang around people that have relative success or they're well liked or whatever, and it just kind of rubs off on them, or someone will hook them up or whatever. I've seen that in subsequent years. That's fairly advanced thought. I'm not saying that I'm like smarter than anyone else, whatever, but it's something I noticed at a very young age, that certain things will just break for certain people, or they'll be more believable, even if it's a pile of malarkey. And same thing, I'm watching Jesse Waters on Fox News, and he's like out and out just like denouncing the shooter, blah, 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 and calling him liberal. I'm sure if I replay it back, there's going to be some escape where there's some language that he's using where he's like, no, I didn't say that, because that's happened to Fox News many times where they've appeared in court. And they're like, well, we're not really news. We're an opinion broadcast or whatever, wink, wink. And again, their viewers, they take it as news, but they can on the record say, well, it's not news. We're just talking. Why are you listening to us? Little old us. But anyway, and all over, Facebook, Instagram, it's all ablaze with, and I love to argue about that type of stuff. So I've already started like alienating some friends with like some preliminary discussions that we've had via text today. And as it turns out, people just kind of want to believe what they want to believe, but Fox News in particular, they're out ahead of it. A lot of people are, as if the shooter is like some purple-haired liberal. Now, we're probably going to find out in subsequent days if they catch the shooter, or if, at least if they get on the trail and they are able to identify who it is. They mistakenly identified some older man and had to let him go. But, we know by the stats, it's probably like 80 plus, if not 90+% chance that it's, the usual right-wing wacko. But, I want to reserve judgment because, there was it last year, like the transgender disgruntled like former worker or whatever that went and shot up the place. So anything can happen, but we know in all likelihood we'll probably who the assailant, once they're ID'd, what they'll, who they'll be. But just just food for thought. It's like where you can just kind of throw thoughts into the atmosphere, and it's almost like it becomes like artifact, like it becomes truth, even when it's definitively proven that it was not true. Because the alleged Trump shooter, which I believe that was a setup. The only intellectual issue that I have is that someone did die, but it feels like it was set up based on the circumstantial evidence of like Trump's ear, blah 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 blah, and just the timing of it, which between that and then Elon Musk and Joe Rogan and as it were the late Charlie Kirk essentially got Trump reelected, because Charlie Kirk was responsible for a huge push among the youth, which is weird because the youth have always been on the liberal side generally, like almost like a 60-40 split. So anyway, the sorry to say, post-mortem will be coming up. I mean that figuratively, not literally. God bless Charlie Kirk. I feel like a lot of what he had to say was aberrant and hateful, but obviously I didn't want him assassinated. So God bless his family. Peace to his friends and family, and I guess we'll see what happens. Hopefully there's no civil war. And quiet as it's kept, we low-key need the shooter to not be a liberal, just so it doesn't add more fuel to the fire, because there's people that are just spoiling for just an all-out like war, shootout, whatever, which is like the last thing we need right now. As it appears, the indicators are increasingly pointing to a declining economy, as always happens under Republican presidents. Like when I say always, I mean like always, if you go back. But anyway, I've already spoken enough. This is longer than I want it to be. Stay with me. God bless. The Lord is faithful. God bless.